Welcome to our channel Psyverge. What if you're not obsessed with getting things perfect? What if you're just afraid of unleashing your true potential? What if perfectionism isn't a virtue at all, but a prison disguised as discipline? Most people will say they want to get better, grow stronger, succeed. But watch them when they get close to that edge, when the moment of transformation is actually within reach. That's when hesitation sets in. That's when the inner saboteur shows up, dressed as the perfectionist, the voice that says, "It's not ready yet. I'm not good enough yet. Maybe later." It feels responsible. It feels rational. But it's not. It's fear, specifically fear of your own power. Carl Jung said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Not your flaws, not your mistakes. Yourself, fully. Because in that acceptance lies an untapped force that most people spend their whole lives avoiding. Perfectionism becomes a socially acceptable way to avoid risk, to stay in control, to never be fully seen. You claim you're chasing excellence, but really, you're hiding behind refinement. You're sharpening the blade endlessly because you're terrified of what happens when you finally swing it. We've been taught to be afraid of failure, but some of us are even more afraid of success, because success demands change. Power demands responsibility. If you step fully into what you're capable of, you no longer get to blame your childhood, your environment, your luck. You are responsible for what you become. That's a terrifying freedom. It's easier to stay in the shadows of your own potential, pretending you're just not ready yet. Think about how often you delay action in the name of preparation. I'll start once I'm more confident, once I've studied more, once I'm sure it's perfect. But perfection never arrives, and deep down you know it. You've wrapped your fear in a noble disguise, but the truth is you're not a perfectionist. You're just afraid of being powerful. You fear what it might mean to rise, because when you rise, people notice. Expectations grow, criticism comes, and part of you would rather stay invisible than risk that kind of exposure. Nietzsche understood this deeply. He spoke of the will to power, not as domination over others, but as the force of life itself, pushing you to become who you truly are, to evolve, to actualize. That will is in you, but so is resistance. A part of you clings to the comfort of potential. Potential is safe, it's pure. No one can criticize potential, but potential means nothing if it's never realized, and perfectionism is the perfect way to stay stuck, always becoming, never being. What if the version of you that's truly dangerous isn't the one making mistakes? It's the one refusing to act, the one who always hesitates just before the leap. That hesitation becomes your identity. You convince yourself that you're careful, deliberate, cautious. But you're not cautious. You're afraid. Afraid of being too much. Afraid of being judged. Afraid of losing the excuses you've built your personality around. And here's the hardest part to admit. Some people get addicted to that fear. It becomes familiar. It keeps them in control. If you never finish your project, you never have to risk it being rejected. If you never fully commit to a relationship, you never have to feel vulnerable. If you never speak your truth, no one can twist it. You don't fear failure. You fear the collapse of your carefully constructed mask. You fear the death of who you think you're supposed to be. Jung believed that wholeness comes not from becoming perfect, but from embracing the shadow, the part of you that you hide, the part that wants power, that wants recognition, that wants to take up space without apology. You keep that part of yourself locked away under the guise of humility or discipline. But it's there, and it's hungry, and the longer you deny it, the more it consumes you from within. It whispers to you at night, It shows up in your procrastination, your anxiety, your mysterious dissatisfaction. Perfectionism is often just the ego's last stand against transformation. The ego says, let's polish this idea a little more, but the soul is screaming, let me out. You've already had the insight. You've already done the inner work. What's left is to act. But action feels like death. The death of who you were, the death of comfort, the death of illusion. That's why it's so terrifying. But let's be honest, have your greatest moments of growth ever come from playing it safe? Has anyone ever truly stepped into their power by waiting for the perfect moment? The truth is, power is messy, it's raw, it doesn't ask for permission, it doesn't wait for the ideal conditions. It moves, it risks, it creates, and yes, it sometimes fails. But it learns, and it rises again. There's a seductive safety in staying in the phase of preparation, but at some point you have to ask, am I preparing, or am I hiding? Every time you say, I'm not ready, what you're really saying is, I don't trust myself. And that's the core of it. The issue isn't perfection. The issue is self-trust. You don't fear making a mistake. You fear seeing just how powerful you really are, and having no one left to blame when you don't use it. Schopenhauer once said that most people take the limits of their own vision for the limits of the world. You've looked in the mirror and mistaken hesitation for virtue. You've confused paralysis for morality. You've accepted your own fear as a sign of wisdom. But what if your vision is too small? What if the reason you never feel fulfilled is because you're shrinking yourself to fit a cage that no longer exists? There's a version of you that's waiting to be born. Not a perfect version, but a whole one. One who owns their desires, one who risks, one who accepts both power and responsibility. But that version can't exist until you kill the perfectionist. Not gently, not slowly, but decisively. That voice that says, maybe tomorrow, is not your friend. That voice that says, it's not quite good enough, is not your ally. That voice is fear, and it's dressed up in the language of wisdom. Jung taught that our greatest potential lies in the integration of opposites. You don't become whole by denying your ambition. You become whole by integrating it, by owning it, by using it. Not to dominate others, but to create, to influence, to bring something alive in the world that only you can bring. But that requires action, risk, imperfection. So ask yourself, what are you really afraid of? That you'll fail, or that you'll succeed and no longer have your excuses? What if stepping into your power doesn't make you arrogant, but makes you honest? What if the perfectionist in you is just a mask for the frightened child who never felt safe being seen? It's time to stop polishing the mirror and start walking through it. Your power doesn't lie in the perfection of your image. It lies in the mess, in the risk, in the release of needing to be liked or understood. The moment you stop hiding behind not yet, you begin to change. Not gradually, not someday, now. Because maybe the greatest act of courage isn't to become perfect, but to become real. And being real is dangerous, not because you'll be judged, though you will be. Not because you'll fail, though that's possible. It's dangerous because it demands that you stop lying to yourself, that you stop pretending you don't care, that you stop playing small just to avoid upsetting the balance of your carefully curated identity. When you're real, people can't project onto you anymore. You become unpredictable, alive. And that kind of aliveness threatens the systems that profit from your self-doubt. Society teaches us that it's virtuous to be small, to be humble, to wait our turn. But that's not humility, that's submission, and there's a vast difference. True humility is the ability to own your power without needing to broadcast it. It's quiet, it's focused, but it never hides. False humility, on the other hand, is a weapon you turn against yourself. You use it to justify your fear. I'm not better than anyone. I don't want to seem arrogant. But underneath that is a deeper truth. I don't want to be seen trying, in case I fail. Carl Jung warned that when we suppress parts of ourselves, those parts don't disappear. They go underground. They become the shadow. And the longer they stay buried, the more distorted they become. That's why so many people who seem calm on the surface are secretly angry, anxious, bitter. They're at war with themselves because their deeper self is banging on the walls from the inside, demanding to be acknowledged. You can only suppress your power for so long before it starts turning against you. In self-sabotage, in perfectionism, in quiet despair. What happens when you stop pretending that your perfectionism is about high standards? What happens when you admit that it's a way to delay responsibility? That's when things get real, because now you're not polishing an image, you're confronting a truth, and that truth might shake you. It might challenge everything you thought you were, but it also might set you free. You don't need another book, another plan, another motivational speech. You need to decide. Decide to act before you're ready. Decide to speak before it's perfect. Decide to show up as who you are, not the version of you that's perfectly filtered, but the one that's raw and honest and unfinished. Because that's the only place real transformation ever happens. In the unfinished, in the uncomfortable, in the chaos of doing it anyway. And maybe that person has been buried under your perfectionism all along, waiting for you to stop pretending and finally step into the truth of what you are. Not perfect, but powerful.